Welcome to Live on Purpose Radio with Dr. Paul Jenkins, where you will hear inspiring stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Feed your mind with a regular dose of positive energy and show up for your life every day on purpose. Living on purpose means that you have a purpose and you do it intentionally. And now, here's your host, Dr. Paul. Welcome back to Live on Purpose Radio. This is Dr. Paul, the shrink who expands your life. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You hear that in our introduction every time you tune into our podcast. Today, we are featuring you. In other words, you get to become one of those ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We're going to tell you how to do that today. I have a guest with me who is very invested in that cause and in that process. He is a renowned artist and sculptor. He does some of the most beautiful work I've ever seen. And it is such an honor and a thrill, Gary, to have you on my couch today. You're on the shrink's couch. How does that feel?
Yes, I am, and it feels good, and I'm honored to be here, Dr. Paul.
This is Gary Lee Price. There's a .com behind that if you want to go look it up. Gary Lee Price. You've probably seen some of his work. When I was perusing through your website, Gary, I realized, oh, Gary did that one? Oh, Gary did that? You've done some beautiful work, and
thank you.
You're in the business in a little different medium, but you're in the same business that I am. Lifting the human spirit.
Exactly.
Inspiration, positivity.
Yes.
Which I think is a choice. Would you agree with that?
Indeed it is. Yep, we have a choice of a lot of different routes throughout our life, and it absolutely is a choice. Which direction do we want to go? And which direction do we want to hopefully inspire others to go?
Right. And there are a lot of different ways to do that.
Exactly.
Could you talk about that for a minute, just in terms of your own motivation and inspiration and what it is that drives you and drives your work? Give us a little bit of your story.
Absolutely, Dr. Paul. Years ago, and I've been sculpting about 35 years full-time, graduated from the University of Utah in art. Years ago, at the beginning of my career, I attended a Tony Robbins seminar. Okay, and there were these execs from all over the world.
You awakened the giant within, didn't you?
Exactly. Did the fire walk.
Oh, wonderful.
Took my business manager, some of my family. You know, it was just an incredible experience.
Wow.
But one of the exercises that we did was creating our business mantra.
Okay.
And we went through this thing of taking a couple of hours and writing down everything that our business was about.
Right.
Okay, and there were execs from Coke and Ford and sculpture studios, right? So there I am, and we do this, and bottom line, we condensed all the verbiage down to, I think it was 10 words or less that we had to come up with. Okay. And I'd only been sculpting for a few years at that time. I came up with lifting, and I knew I loved people, lifting the human spirit, and I knew I did sculpture. So came up with lifting the human spirit through sculpture.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that became my, what would you call it, my measuring stick, you know, for every piece from henceforth. It would go up against that, and does it do that? Does it do that? Does it inspire others? Does it lift them? And so that's been my path for my whole career.
Wait, hold on. So you're living on purpose?
I sure hope so.
How appropriate. But defining that purpose was a key element for you.
Yes.
Early in your career.
Yep.
To make sure that everything that you're doing accomplishes whatever your core purpose is.
Exactly. And I would go deeper to say my mother, who I lost her at age 6, she somehow, through working with me on an individual basis as a little toddler, and that somehow she saw that I had an ability to express myself artistically. So she spent lots of time with me at the kitchen table doing these art projects. So when she was unfortunately killed, and I was 6 years old, and it was a very tragic situation, it gave me the ability to, instead of repress things and hold things inside, because I witnessed it and stuff, and I was there.
Oh, wow.
It gave me the ability to get that out. I didn't have to repress that.
Some way to express all
some
that.
way to, yeah. And that happened in Germany. So when I came to the States, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Anderson in Montpelier, Idaho, would hold up my paintings and drawings and say, look what Gary Price did. So all of a sudden, I'm dealing with this inner conflict, and I just lost my mom and my stepfather and all this stuff, and yet I'm getting recognition, and I'm getting some positiveness for what I'm able to do. And I think that right there put me on a positive path,
right,
that has been, carried throughout my life.
Which I hope any of you who are parents are listening to the message behind this. Parents or teachers or anyone who has influence with particularly our young people. What are we acknowledging and recognizing in them? Can we see what's in there? And I'm so grateful that someone did that for you, Gary.
Mrs. Anderson, I tell you. In fact, a few years ago, I took a life-size sculpture up there of 2 children reading and installed it in front of the A.J. Winters Elementary School. And I dedicated that to Mrs. Anderson and the teachers that influence our lives.
Mm-hmm. What an amazing influence that is.
It is, I'll tell you. It's
something as simple as reinforcing a child's mission or purpose.
Yes.
Can then reach out in the coming generations to countless people.
Yeah.
There's no end to it.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, this is fun. And I can't hold off any longer on this next story. We've got to get to this piece because it fits right in with what we've already talked about. One of the most inspiring people that I have ever read, but unfortunately never met, was Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
You came into my office here today, Gary, with a picture of you and Mrs. Frankl. What's this all about? I'll let you lead into this, and we're going to end up in a very determined place today. But share with us that story and the story of this sculpture that Dr. Frankl found to be so inspiring. And let's take it from there.
You bet. I'm honored to do so. Our life's path is so interesting. Where it leads us and what we do exactly when we are on path. Mm-hmm. Having that mantra with my sculpture and wanting to have a purpose behind it and lift others and stuff and inspire others. I noticed that a lot of my pieces ended up having hands in them that were coming together. Mm-hmm. Sculpting hands and arms, and whether it be children twirling each other around, or children in a ring around the rosy thing, or Native Americans helping each other up a cliff. Yeah. Over and over, that recurring thing came about. So I'm cruising along in my career, and a few years ago, this guy pulls up in front of my studio. And once again, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction and, karma and just all that. So I'm sculpting away, and he pulls up into my studio. And the first thing he sees when he pulls up there is another sculpture of hands. It's a 6-foot version of a piece I call Synergy.
Oh, yeah.
And there are 6 hands that are connected in a circle.
Right.
Yeah. And once again, that was a message that we're all interconnected, that we're one, that we're not in this alone, that we're brothers and sisters and we're one. So he pulls up and he sees that piece. We're loading it into the truck to be shipped off somewhere. Mm-hmm. Comes into my studio and he says, Gary, I want to introduce myself. My name is Kevin Hall. Mm-hmm. And I have worked for Stephen Covey for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And Stephen and I want to create something that is a magnificent idea that has not had a design put to it. And then he said, have you ever heard of Dr. Viktor Frankl? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I had not. I did not know who Viktor Frankl was.
Well, you can't know about him until you hear about him for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go.
And that was it, and he left.
And by the way, if any of you who are listening don't know who Dr. Frankl is yet, go visit the internet and find out. And his book, Man's Search for Meaning, I think is required reading for all of humanity. But that's an aside. Gary, continue.
Amen. Boy, that is, I tell you. So Kevin left by saying, well, Dr. Frankl had this idea of creating a bookend to the Statue of Liberty, a monument. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, his vision was to create a statue of responsibility.
And by bookend, he meant on the other coast.
Yeah, exactly. Bookend the whole nation. And I thought, wow, what a grandiose thought. You know, what an idea. What a paradigm. And so that got the wheels clicking and turning. And so I rushed out and bought a copy of Man's Search for Meaning. And,
good. You did your homework.
Quickly did my homework and that. And couldn't put the book down. I mean, it was so fascinating. Yeah. His experiences of being a psychologist, during the Holocaust and being apprehended by the Nazis and put into prison camps, losing his first wife, his unborn child, his parents.
His whole family.
This book is unbelievable. And yet, what's cool about the book, he doesn't dwell on that.
No, that's
the
just
whole
the context.
Purpose is just to move him to a higher level in spite of these horrible tragedies.
Right.
Okay. And then he has the idea in there, well, okay, you in America, you've got the Statue of Liberty. How about if you go beyond that and realize that if you're not responsible, those liberties...
You lose them.
Could be lost. Yeah.
Freedom requires not only liberty, but responsibility as well.
Yeah, it's not just for free. It just isn't there for no price. And so that got the wheels going and led to a visit to Mrs. Frankl in Vienna. Dr. Ellie Frankl welcomed us into her home, got to show her this design that I had come up with that happens to be two hands connected.
Yes.
And it was heavenly.
Yeah. This Dr. Viktor Frankl, because I guess his wife is also a doctor.
Exactly.
Dr. Viktor Frankl, who has since passed away.
Yes, in 1997.
Had a sculpture on his bookshelf. Can you describe that and what connection it has?
Well, this is the cool part, Dr. Paul, is I'm in the apartment and I show her the design. Okay, I have a 17-inch, we call it a maquette of the...
We'll show it to our listeners now. It's here on the table. Sorry, it's audio.
It's two hands connected and it's 17
we'll
inches
give you
tall.
a website, so hang tight.
There you go. So I show her this design, and we had one cast in stainless steel because my vision of the piece is to have it in a material that radiates and gives off light.
That reflects, yeah.
Exactly. So I show it to her, and she looks at it, and she holds it, and then she says, "Come here, I want to show you something." I'm going, whoa, what could possibly happen here? She takes me into his study, and on the bookshelf, she says, "I want to point out something. You see that niche up there?" And this was a room that had tens of thousands of books in it. Dr. Frankl and Mrs. Frankl spent their whole life there. And he wrote, I don't know how many dozens of books. But anyway, in the middle of all these bookshelves, there's a leather-clad niche with a sculpture in it about 20 inches high. It's a wood carving of a man reaching up to the heavens. And she said Viktor Frankl named that the suffering man and would use that as a, what would you call it, a metaphor for responsibility, saying, where's the hand reaching down?
Right.
Okay, and she says, so you, this American, bring to me a design that answers my husband's question of responsibility. And it was, up until that point, I honestly did not know if I had, if this would resonate with not only the Frankl family, but the world, the universe, whatever, of responsibility. At that very point, it did.
Right.
Wow.
As we come back from this break, you'll learn more about what the stature of responsibility is and how you get to be involved with
it. You've heard the question 100 times. Is the glass half empty or half full? If we are in negativity mode, we see the glass as half empty. Anyone can see it's half empty. When we are feeling negative, we focus on what is missing and lament the lack of water in the glass. When we are feeling more positive, we see the glass as half full. Of course it is half full. Anyone can see that. We focus on what we desire and celebrate the presence of water. Then there are those who see it as completely full all the time. These seemingly crazy people are not just positive. They are pathologically positive. Pathological positivity is an empowering mental supernormality that lifts us above the normal perception of reality. It is a higher level of thinking. We see the glass and our lives as completely full, even in the toughest situations. If you've enjoyed Live on Purpose Radio, then you will love Dr. Paul Jenkins' book on pathological positivity. Available now to order, visit pathologicalpositivity.com to get your copy today. That's pathologicalpositivity.com.
Thank you for listening to Live on Purpose Radio. We're so glad to have you here. Please come by the website, drpauljenkins.com, spelled with a D-R, drpauljenkins.com. On the website, you'll have an opportunity to receive a free download. And while you're there, make sure you click on the social media icons. Come over to Facebook, where we will be posting these episodes as well as our YouTube videos and other content and announcements for you to share. Please like us, comment, subscribe, join the conversation. We're happy to have you with us here at Live on Purpose Radio. Let's all support each other to live on purpose. drpauljenkins.com.
Management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Stephen R. Covey.
Accidents. Do you believe in accidents, Gary?
Well, unfortunately, I had one this morning on my bicycle, but
yeah.
But I know what you're saying there.
And we call a lot of things accidents because things happen, and we don't always control what those are. But it's interesting how things come together for a greater purpose, something that surpasses any of us. You introduced, before the break, the statue of responsibility. Of all the sculptures that you have created, this one, to me, has some significant meaning. You shared the example or the story of visiting the Frankel home and finding that you had unknowingly answered a question. Well, you didn't know that you were going to, oh yeah, here's this man reaching up. I'm going to give the guy reaching down and we'll just complete this whole thing. You didn't plan it that way.
Yeah, I didn't even know if Dr. Frankel liked art in any way.
Right.
Come to find out, he actually loves sculpture.
You followed your own inspiration and this purpose that you talked about in our first segment to create something that became a link. You shared with me during the break. Here's Gary Lee Price, who at a very young age witnesses the death of his mother.
Right.
Wow. Can you think of anything harder than that?
Yeah, and it's something that you don't block out. You don't forget it. It's as vivid today as it was, 30 years ago. And so it's
one of those life-altering experiences. And then here's Viktor Frankl, who is sent to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And then years later, an idea that Viktor Frankl had and proposed shows up at your studio. You didn't even know who Viktor Frankl was.
Yeah. It shows, in my mind, it shows how things are so much bigger than what we can see.
Right.
You know, there's such a big picture going on, and we think sometimes we have a grasp of it, but usually we don't, because it's so much bigger than ourselves and, you know,
That's
everything.
Right. So here's the piece that I tickled and I teased at the beginning of this show today. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
I love that.
Can you picture, as you listen to this podcast today, and as you hear this story of Gary Lee Price and this amazing sculpture that he has created for the purpose of acknowledging the importance of responsibility as part of our freedom. And what if we could create a companion statue, a bookend statue? So we've got the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast. We've got the Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. And everyone who's living in this great nation is sandwiched between those two concepts, liberty and responsibility. And we use that as a constant reminder that we are personally responsible for our freedom. It's interesting that our freedom was given to us by our founding fathers, our military, people who have sacrificed everything. The Statue of Liberty was given to us by the French.
Right.
They saw what we were doing and they thought it was cool and they sent us a statue. Here you go. It's a gift.
Yep.
Who's going to give us the Statue of Responsibility?
I love this lead in. This is perfect.
Gary, I can tell I'm pushing your buttons. I'll just be quiet and let you talk for a minute.
Well, I tell you, one of my core beliefs is that everything boils down to relationships. You know, and none of us are infallible with our relationships. We all, you know, some people come into our lives and they're here for, you know, the entirety of our lives. Others come in for a few minutes, and we all have challenges with relationships. But I believe that everything boils down to those relationships and the way we treat others, the way they treat us. And so this statue ends up being two hands that are connected, which is a symbol, and every sculpture is just a symbol. You know, it's just a little teeny thing that has a great big meaning.
That's right.
You know, it's just like us little mortal ordinary people are capable of doing great big awesome things.
That's right.
And if we're on path, we do that. So this statue epitomizes relationships, and the only way that this is going to happen is if it is created by the people. It's $1 here.
Right.
In fact, the Statue of Liberty, it sat in the harbor for several years, and they needed to build a pedestal for it, a base. Okay, and until Pulitzer came along, who owned the newspaper back then, and said anybody that donates, I think it was like a dime or more, maybe it was $1, but at least a dime or so, I will publish your name in the newspaper.
Oh.
So within a few months after he said that, and this is known as the original, what would you call it, crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Until he came along, that just sat there. When people could get a little bit of, you know, I don't know, recognition or whatever, bam, they raised, I think it was $600,000 at the time, got the base done, put up this magnificent statue, and it's been this symbol forever. So our vision with this Statue of Responsibility is that it is funded and created by the people.
By the people.
Yes, and of course there are professional firms, you know, that will be hired to do the architecture and the building and all that stuff.
Well, yeah.
But funded by the people.
As opposed to
a government project.
Exactly.
Or just a corporate project. Now, there will be corporations that will help this, but it's not going to say on the top of their, the Trump statue of responsibility or whatever. Right. We want Donald Trump, of course, to donate to it.
Yes, and Donald,
every corporation.
If you're listening.
Exactly. But we want people, we want schools, to raise an amount and send it in. We want little individuals to...
Pennies from kids.
Yes. Everybody gets involved because then they take ownership in it, and it's theirs.
Right.
It belongs to them.
This is so appropriate when you think about what it is that we're symbolizing here.
Yes.
I've wondered before. Sometimes you hear of these tragedies that happen and people go to some center. I'm thinking of I can't even remember which hurricane it was, but people showed up at the Superdome and they're waiting for whom?
Yeah.
For what? And then there's other people who go out and take matters into their own hands and start rescuing themselves.
Yep.
And that is so inspiring to me. In fact, there's a scene in a movie called Ever After. It's a Cinderella story. And Danielle de Barbarac is the princess in this story, and she gets captured by this unsavory Pierre Le Pew. And she's there in his place, and he's got all kinds of ill intent for her. Well, she decides to rescue herself. So she wipes him out, and she's marching away from this castle while the prince rides up. Mm-hmm. He says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I came to rescue you." Rescue me? She just rescued herself.
Yeah.
And isn't that what our American spirit is all about? Taking responsibility for our own freedom and for our own life, living on purpose. So what better way to put up this amazing statue than to have the people, the citizens of the United States, and if you're listening from outside of the United States, you are welcome to contribute as well, because this is a global economy that we're talking about.
Absolutely, and it's a global message. This thing isn't just for the people of the United States. It's a global concept.
So, Gary, you got involved in not just a project here, but this is a movement.
Yes, and in fact, my wife coined the phrase, it's not just a monument, it's a movement.
Right.
Because, with a sculpture, any good sculpture, it has, pages and pages of meaning. Yes, it's an icon, and we have to have symbols in order to, relate to things, but it's what it's about. And its roots are deep, very, very deep, with Viktor Frankl, with what that whole thing represented, with every American, with, like you're talking about, individual responsibility and all that. It goes so deep, and we haven't met anybody that it does not resonate with. Everybody gets it.
Right. If this is resonating with you, you are the ordinary people who do extraordinary things. This statue, this amazing American movement, does not happen without us. There is no government agency that's going to take this on. And if they did, by the way, they would come and demand your money, which isn't cool. I don't want to be forced to give something that I'm willing to give freely. So I like the idea of contributing through my own responsibility and my own creative efforts to something that symbolizes something I truly believe in.
And your own sacrifice.
Yes.
There will be a lot of people that will donate to this, that it will be a big deal.
Right.
From little kids gathering cans to raise $1 or $2, to households donating $100 or $1,000 or whatever. And I always say, Dr. Paul, that it's never about the money. It's about people. It's about relationships. It's about a united cause, bringing people together. That's what this whole project is about.
Right. The reason you're here today, Gary, at my request, is because a good friend of us connected, a good friend of mine and a good friend of yours connected us.
Exactly. Same principle.
And that's how it works. These relationships create wealth. And I'm talking about human life value wealth. It has nothing to do with money, but it generates money. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. It's just a means.
So you're here because I, through the introduction of my friend Woody Woodward, got to know you and what it is you were doing, and thought, yeah, this is something that I believe in. This is something I want to get behind. And he emailed me not too long ago, and he says, hey, can you get involved in this movement and let your people know about it? And I thought, what better way than to bring Gary Lee Price, whose name will go down in history one way or another, to have this conversation. And thank you so much for being here. Let's get to the details about how people can get involved. There is a website, statueofresponsibility.com. And listeners, please understand, I am not asking you to go there to donate. I am asking you to go there to see what's up.
Right.
What's going on there's several videos.
Yeah, in fact, one of them is beautiful footage of Dr. Frankel talking about the Statue of Responsibility, the actual footage of where he talks about it.
Right, years before you knew who Dr. Frankel was.
Yes, he first started advocating it in the 60s.
Right. If you don't know who Dr. Frankel is, that's part of your homework. This is required reading for humanity. Man's search for meaning. So please become familiar with that. I'm inviting you to the website, statueofresponsibility.com, because I believe in this cause. I believe in the people behind it. I believe in you and the principles that drive your life. So go become familiar with it. If it resonates with you, if it speaks to you, then you are being called to practice your own responsibility, and you may choose to donate as a result of that. But this is not an infomercial.
And that's a great way to put it. This is a human interest
Exactly. Gary Lee Price, an amazing artist and sculptor, also a visionary about what is possible for this great country and this great world of ours. Thank you, Gary, for being here.
Thank you. Such an honor to be with you today.
Okay, it's time, everybody. Live on purpose.